Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's our host for this week, Russell Martin.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Student Ministries Conversations podcast. I am Russell Martin. I am one of your hosts, along with Brent Aiken, who will be with you next week. But we are glad you are joining us. We are glad that you have chosen to spend this hour or so with us. We want to remind you, make sure and go to the website, studentministryconversations.org. Check out show notes from this episode and from other episodes. Go check out Talk Student Men at Talk Student Men on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. That's where we hang out on the socials. And just encourage you to connect with us and to continue to listen, share this with other people. And we hope that you find this helpful as you continue to pour into the lives of students. Today, I'm excited because I have Ken Burns with me. And as many of y'all have heard from previous conversations, I moved during the pandemic. I moved from being a youth pastor to being a lead pastor at a church. And so Ken is my youth pastor at the church. And so it's a different kind of dynamic for me, things that I get to learn, those things that I hated that my pastor did. I have to watch and make sure I don't do. And then working with Ken and helping him and also staying out of his way as he does ministry with our students. And Ken does a great job and a fabulous job, but I'm not going to talk too much about him. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So Ken, can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are? You can go in as deep as you want, or you can kind of fly over, but how did you get to Lake Houston UMC as the pastor?
Sure. And first of all, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I've listened to a couple episodes because, you can learn something every day, and you always want to challenge yourself to learn things. So thanks for doing this and helping us youth pastors to, throw ideas at each other. But yeah, crazy story. So I kind of got a late start compared to most people. I actually I was the guy behind the scenes at church most of the time, believe it or not. My wife was real involved, and she was the head of all these different committees. And I was the guy that just kind of hung out with her, did things, and was behind the scenes and helped her with things. And then she got this crazy idea one day that we were going to go on a mission trip to Mexico. And I was like, no, we're not. You hear the stories of the cartel and this and that. And we just had we had a young child. And I was like, no, we are not going on this mission trip. Well, of course, being the husband I am, and she finally won the battle. And I said, okay, if you go on this trip, I am going to go with you. So we went. And when I was there, I call it a big part of my calling. When I was there, we helped an orphanage, build a school. We visited different places, and I saw poverty like I've never seen before. I seen literally families building shelters along some rail tracks with whatever they could find. And we walked through that community, and I saw, newborns wrapped in whatever they could find. And I was like, wow, it really got to me. And then one day, the last day we were there, we were actually at a church, a Spanish speaking church. Obviously, we're in Mexico. And these same people I saw along the tracks were at this church praising God. And when I seen them praising God, they were happy, they were fulfilled. And I was like, these are the same people that in my opinion, had nothing. And here they are worshiping God. And then at the end, they brought us to the front, and the pastor actually laid hands on us, and all the kids were laying hands on me. And I tell you, they were praying, and I had no idea what they were saying. But I know it was full of love, and I felt the Holy Spirit for the very first time. It filled me. I didn't know how to react, but I was in tears, and this burning feeling came over me. And then as we were traveling back home, I looked at Cindy. I go, I want to do ministry. I want more of this. I want to get more involved, and I want to do youth ministry. And there were some youth on that trip who I had been talking to when we were there, and they were opening up about some things that I had actually gone through, and was able to relate to them and kind of walk them through that. And I don't know. I was like, I want to do youth ministry. I don't know why, but that's what I want to do. So what was crazy, and by the way, I was 30 years old. I don't mind telling you, I'm 42 now, so that was 12 years ago. We're riding in this church van that we were praying would get us from point A to point B. But there we were, and I was telling our pastor at the time, and his name is Clay Whitaker, Pastor Clay Whitaker. We were heading back to the church, and I was telling him about this call. I kid you not, 2 days later, the youth director at the church, who had been doing youth ministry for a really long time, told the pastor he wanted to leave. He had things going on in his life he had to take care of. So it just so happens, I stepped in, and that's pretty much where I got into youth ministry and have been since then.
And when you say you stepped into youth ministry, you actually, that's not your only job that you do. And so that's one of the things we're talking about today is Bi-Vocational Youth Ministry. And we know that there are lots and lots of youth directors out there who do this because they love students, and they may get a little bit of a payment to help kind of cover some bills and things like that. But we know that it's not near enough for any youth worker. I don't think gets near enough for what they do. But there's a lot of youth workers who have two jobs and work two jobs, and so what we wanted to talk a little bit about today was how do you balance? How do you do that? How do you set priorities? And then Ken, right now, he'll tell you later, is also going through on the path for ordination. So he's got an extra job within that.
Yes.
But so tell us about your other job. You don't have to tell details, but what do you do?
So I actually attended Lon Morris College right out of high school. I was forced to go. I didn't want to leave family and friends. Lon Morris was a private Methodist college in Jacksonville, Texas. I attended there both years, and by the grace of God, somehow graduated. And I found the love of my life when I was there. Don't know how that happened. That was definitely God. But as soon as we got out of school, I was out with a business degree. I found out real quick that I was going to get married, and you don't get a really good paying job with just an associate's degree. In fact, it's hard to get any job when we first got out of school. So I did what anybody does. I used connections, and my sister was working on the docks, which is pretty much the port of Houston, one of the busiest ports in the US. She was working at one, said, "Hey, I could probably get you on for the summer." And I said, "Great, I got to pay bills somehow." So I went to the docks, and that was in 2000. And I started at the bottom, worked my way up into management, which is where I'm at now, and never left. So that is, like you said, that is my full-time job. One of the things going into youth ministry, like I was previously talking about, was I was only going to be able to do part-time, and they agreed with that. And we could probably talk more about what that looks like. And also, this was a very small church, and I did not get paid for my first 7 years of youth ministry, nor did I want to. And I thought that was, it was okay at that time. I was able to support my family and do something that I was called to do, and it worked out. And yeah.
So when you had that other job and then you got this call to youth ministry, what are some of the things that you kind of went through as far as you may be one person who did a yes or no list, or positives and negatives, or at least talked about the upsides or the downsides. What are some of the things that you considered on both sides of making that decision to add ministry in a formal setting? Even though you weren't getting paid, you were beyond just a volunteer. You were taking charge and being in charge of the ministry. So what are some of the things that you thought about on both sides of that?
So good question. And actually, I think about that even now, how I'm going to further go into ministry. But at that time, like I said, it was a smaller church. There wasn't a lot of expectation, if I'm honest. So I was like, well, this is going to be easy. In fact, I developed a program there that was, I think, was pretty successful. But I didn't have a lot of expectation at first, if I'm honest. And I told the pastor and the church, I can do this, but I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm willing to try it and see if it works. And let's be honest, nobody wants to step into youth ministry. they're like, hey, say no more, you're in. And so I talked with Cindy, and we were already up there all the time anyway, so it wasn't really a big life change, except that I was no longer behind the scenes. I was actually in charge of something, and that's it. Pretty much fell into place. And this ministry was a little bit different because most churches are the type where you open your doors, kids get dropped off, everything is great. Well, in this community, it's very it's poor income families, and a lot of the parents could care less to go to church or not. And there was actually a bus ministry which started for like Sunday school and church that was already in place, and I started using that for the youth ministry to pick up kids. And because we were able to do that, it actually grew into a pretty successful program. When I first started, it was 7 kids, and we grew into close to 60. And it was hard because we did have to pick them up, and that became challenging in itself. We had to get more transportation. I didn't have a lot of volunteers, so it was me picking up kids, bringing them to the church. Hopefully had an adult there to watch them go get another round of kids. It was very challenging, but it's just when you called, you do it and you try to make it work.
I think that would be another great conversation, is to talk about the difference between those churches where kids kind of get dropped off and everybody kind of goes to the church, and then those because we've had several people on who have had ministries in areas where the parents are not involved at all, and we know that's important, but then how do you continue to make those? So that was not at the church you're at now, which is the church I'm at now. So how did you get to where you are now?
That's a great question. And what happened is we lived in the east side of town, and we decided that we wanted to move out of the city limits, further out. We wanted to go get 10 acres and all these things. And we found out real quick that 10 acres, we're not millionaires. So we ended up looking all over the place and landed in Crosby. And that's where we are now, is in Crosby, Texas. We were actually searching for a new church. We wanted to plug in our community where we were close to. And there were some other issues going on at the other church, and it was time to move on to a new chapter. And I tell you, it was tough. We were searching a good probably 2 years. We were kind of going to a service for 4 tries. We didn't want to go one time and stop, because that's just not fair. Sometimes you can catch somebody on an off day or whatever. And so we got invited by a friend of ours who lives in Crosby to try Lake Houston. So we said, okay. The very first time we came, it was a youth Sunday. Imagine that. and they were doing skits. It was great. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I love this. And this church is in Huffman, by the way, which is right next to Crosby. So it's not real far. And so we went again. And this time at the end of it, I remember them saying, everybody pick up the chairs. We have an event after this. Because at the time, the contemporary service was inside the gym, which is the same place where the youth met. And so this sounds strange, but there's a lady there named Cassandra McGregor. We're good friends now. She said, hey, help us pick up these chairs. And that did it for me. Like, all of a sudden I'm involved. And in the previous churches, we were just kind of visiting and didn't really fill our place. But just that one instant, it made us feel good. And then so we took my son to the youth program to try out, and I went with him. He was like, he's kind of shy. He was like, hey, can you come with me? And I said, sure. So I went with them the first youth lesson. And again, and I was pretty much, I put youth ministry to the side at this point. I left that part out. Part of the transitioning was also burnout. I mean, I was doing all kinds of things, and I was growing with the doc job. So it was a decision to make, to pass the torch to the next guy at that, at that church, to go to the next one. And anyway, so we were there. The youth lesson went okay. It was good. The kids were really friendly. And then, believe it or not, a week later, guess what? The youth director decided to go. Actually, so there was no youth director. So I say, look, I can do this. I'll fill in until you find somebody, because at the time they had a full-time youth pastor or youth director, and that's what they were used to. And I knew I couldn't do full time, nor was I interested in it at that time, to be honest. So I was like, hey, I'll fill in till y'all find somebody. That can be tricky. And then we had a VBS, and they said, hey, go do Bible storytelling. So I led that, which I still do to this day. But anyways, all of a sudden, Pastor Frank Coates, who was the senior pastor at the time, was like, why aren't you the youth director? And I said, well, because I can't do this full time. I can't do it. He goes, well, does somebody have to do it full time? He goes, well, wait a minute. You're already doing it now and it's not full time. So I said, I don't know. I just got out. I miss it a lot. And anyways, from that point, and they were telling me, hey, you know what? We even in this position, you can even get paid. I was like, what? You can get paid? And actually, I told them you didn't have to. I just want to do this because I love it. And they're like, no, we insist. We're going to pay you. And the rest is history. I went through the interview process. They hired me, and I believe that was 7-ish years ago. And then as I'm there, well, I don't know if you want to talk about that now. I got into another part of ministry.
Yeah. Well, so I do want to go back to burnout, because I think that is something that's a big deal for pastors everywhere. But you had to kind of a couple of different sides with that. So when you say you burned out, would you share kind of what led to that and kind of how that came about?
Yeah, I can tell you exactly how it happened. So I was putting youth ministry ahead of everything. Like, it was my full focus. That's kind of how I am. If I go into something, I go all out. And it took a while to find some balance with that. But I was going all in, not only at work, but also with the youth ministry. I had something scheduled for 3 nights a week or 3 days a week. And then I had camps. And like I said, I didn't have volunteers there. I didn't really know how all that worked. I thought doing it by yourself and having a spouse or someone help you was the way to go. But when you're doing it all yourself, meeting with parents, picking up the kids, creating the events, decorating for the events, taking the kids to camp, raising the funds to get them to camp, when you're doing all of these things on your own, and then you have to remember you have to do your honey-do list at home. You got to take care of your home duties. You got to be a dad. I missed some things when my son was younger. He would have activities. Well, not only was I being a youth pastor or a youth director, I was also a soccer coach. So I was trying to do that as well on the side. And I think I put way too much on my plate, and I was trying to go all out in each one. And I got tired. I got tired and frustrated, and it affected my ministry because the frustration started kicking in and the being tired.
Yeah, I'm about to say, but what were those things that you saw? You're like, hey, I'm hitting burnout because.
Well, for one is I'll be honest, you start getting shorter with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
You don't seem as patient because you're on edge, because you're worried about hurrying up to get the event done so you can go to the next event. So they kind of got shorted on that. Or things like you just don't schedule as much. They're used to a certain busy schedule, and now you're not doing that. They start getting frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Not having time to have one-on-ones with the kids, which I think are so important to catch up with kids, not on Wednesday or Sunday, see how they're doing. I was doing less of that, and they needed that. I got to where I was running late to go get the kids to pick them up. So then when I got them all to the church, we had very little time to do anything, and I was taking them right back. Asking volunteers and getting frustrated because nobody wanted to help. Just all of that just compiling into one, it got tough.
And I am glad it does seem to me with a lot of people hit burnout and it's like a complete broken. It seems like you at least were able to go, okay, I'm burned out. I need to step out of this for a while before I get burned out to the point where it's actually like, physically debilitating or mentally debilitating or something like that.
Yeah. And I want to tell you this too, like it was, and I'm going to be completely honest, I was ready to move on. I rushed into trying to find somebody to take over. And I did not equip or train them well enough. And this was a young college kid, and I was just like, great, you're going to take it. This is what I do. And I left because I wanted the ministry to keep going, and it died. And I'm sad to say that, but to this day, they don't have a youth program, and that's pretty sad. And I think that was due to the burnout. I should have took more time with this person, built her a team, did it the right way,
Mhm.
and I think they would still have a youth program.
And the challenge here, I mean, these are all things I did full-time youth ministry for many years, all things that I dealt with. But when I dealt with them, I was at the church. I got there at 9:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
I left at 3 or 4. And when I went home to my family, and I still did 100 miles an hour. I still did those things, but I was doing that, not having, my support came from that job. And so that's different than your support's coming from something else that you love doing.
Yeah.
But then doing this. And so, I mean, we'll get off burnout. One more question. How did you, coming to Lake Houston, knowing you had a second chance, what are some of the things that you changed? Because this may be the biggest thing for Bi-Vocational Youth Ministry in this whole conversation, maybe this burnout conversation, because I think it's going to come faster because there's more pressure and there's more things you have to cover and do. So what are the things that you did differently 7 years ago or 6 years ago when you came into this? What are the lessons you learned? And maybe what are some of the lessons you haven't learned yet?
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about this for the next 5 hours, right? But that is so important. And hopefully, whoever's listening to this can learn from this. The first thing I did, so when I passed the torch at that church, I told my wife, I said, I want to take a break. And I did not think I would ever get back into youth ministry, to be honest. It was more like, hey, let's get back into church. Let me just get involved in some activities and join some mission teams, and that's it. So I had about a 2-year period where that's what I did. I was just, an active member, but not leading a ministry. And it didn't feel right, to be honest. It felt like something was missing. So one of the things that was different when deciding to take this on was, first of all, there were very high expectations because previous youth directors were very successful. They built a really active program, and they didn't want just anybody to come in. They wanted somebody to pretty much take it and run with it. And so I even, I went on Facebook, checked out what they were doing, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I can live up to these standards, because it seemed like it was a very different community. They expected more, and I felt like I was not equipped for something like that, if I'm honest. And my wife is my backbone. She's like, Ken, do it. God's got you. You wouldn't even be considering this if God didn't want you to get involved in this. So I said, okay, well, this is what we're going to have to do. I'm going to have to get more organized. I'm going to have to make sure I have volunteers to help me. And I'm going to have to basically have a team in place instead of I have to do it by myself. I'm actually going to ask for help and make sure we have a team to help do the ministry. And that was huge, was having a team. Don't think you have to do it by yourself. That was number one. And then number two was come up with a reasonable schedule. Don't try to grow your youth ministry by all the activities you have. I kind of fell into that. Like, if I plan all this fun stuff, we're going to grow a youth ministry. And I was really putting the discipleship more on the back burner, is more focused on the fun to grow the numbers. And I realized that is not the full focus. Get a balanced schedule where you do have fun. You got to have fun. You got to have some games. You got to have that those activities where there's fellowship, so you can build relationships, but really focus on what you're teaching the kids. Really focus on the discipleship. And actually, by doing that actually grew the numbers, because the kids felt like you cared, and it was more than just let's go have some fun. So that was another thing, was trying to balance your calendar to where you can be a dad, work a full-time job, and do a successful youth ministry, and still have time to have some downtime on your own time. If you want to go fishing or play golf with your senior pastor and laugh at him, um, you got to make some time for yourself as well, so you don't get burnt out. And it's worked so far.
And just so you know, I still have the video of you hitting the tree. So
Yeah.
we can laugh at each other with that. So what I heard from that is organization,
Yes.
being more organized, having a team, and asking for help being the first kind of part of that.
Yes.
And then on the other side was the balanced schedule and that focus on discipleship and focus on relationships.
Yeah, and let me tell you another thing that really helps somebody who's like me and has a full-time job and they're doing youth ministry. When I first started, I wrote all my stuff. I did all of it myself. I didn't even know there was curriculum out there. I didn't. This was all new to me. I just jumped in, said, okay, I'm going to teach youth about God, and we're going to have some fun stuff and some camps. But I started talking to other youth directors. That's important, to be in a community where you can talk to other people that are doing the same thing you're doing. And then I found a curriculum, which is Grow Curriculum. And by all means, we're not sponsoring them on this podcast, but I do want to share them as a source, something like that, where they give you basically everything from what you're going to be talking about. They give you the graphics, the slides, the games, the scriptures, the different. They even show you how you can plan your whole calendar for the year. So if you're not there full time and have time to do all that yourself, they pretty much do it for you. You just adjust it to your own schedule and can take their curriculum and adjust it to your students, and it is a lifesaver. That saves so much time. And it's not that you're slacking off, it's just it's there and you use it instead of having to start from scratch and not know any direction on where to go. That was a huge help.
I will throw in, actually, we do have a connection with Grow. We had Elle Campbell on the podcast back in the beginning, and they did give us a connection deal. So if you do want to use Grow, you can go to studentministryconversations.org/grow. And if you order it from that, you actually helped a little bit. That comes back and helps us on the podcast keep doing these things. So we are not sponsored by, but we do have a connection with them in full disclosure of that. So, one of the things I know I used to Grow too was, and I think you talked about getting organized and you talked about that year calendar.
Yes.
And so can you tell us a little bit about, because I know Grow Curriculum doesn't say you have to use our curriculum for this, but they at least put out to say that year long. And I know something I've pushed with you is, me coming in as a pastor pushed, let's get as organized as possible, because I think the more organized you can be, then the more free you can be. And so something, if you get to know Ken very long, you hear the phrase "do it live," and so he's like, "Do it live. Let's just do it live." For you Enneagram folks, he's Enneagram 7, and so he's just like, "Let's do it. Let's have fun," which I love. Drives me crazy is at Enneagram 5 and having everything done. But it's a fun play and a fun dynamic. But I think no matter what you do, no matter what program or curriculum you use, planning it out for the year helps on my end. But I'd like you to share kind of for you what difference that made whenever you found it, and then we'll talk about being with Bi-Vocational as well.
Sure. So you are right. Doing it live, that's my phrase. And probably me saying anything about being organized, you're probably like, what? I have organized chaos is what I call it. But no, being forced to sit down, that's a harsh word, but being encouraged to sit down and create a year in advance, it helps you stay on track. You can look at what's ahead and start planning for that. It also allows you to send calendars to your parents and things, especially for events. So maybe they want to join you for a camp. They can go ahead and take off work those days, or plan family vacations. When I didn't let them know in advance, that was one of my biggest downfalls from parents was, man, you told us this at the last minute or we could have helped. And I said, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. And even now I find myself having to do that sometimes, but at least it gives me direction for the year. And you can adjust the curriculum. Like you feel like something just happened in the news that you want to address, you address it, and then you just go right back to it. So it's not like you have to stick to it and that's it. One challenge with being bivocational is you don't know what the job is going to require the next year. And every once in a while, there will be times where I'm like, man, Russell, I can't do this. I got to cancel it. Or you try to find someone to fill in for you so you don't have to cancel. But that's kind of a challenge where you're planning your calendar in a year for the church events, your ministry, but then your work schedule does not align with that. That's when it can get a little tricky and dicey. And sometimes you got to cancel things and you feel bad about that. So that's kind of tricky sometimes.
But it does give you, when adults know a couple of months in advance, it's easier. You don't, because you haven't had to cancel as many things.
Correct.
Because people know, hey, this event's coming up. And, one of the things I'm sure you would agree with, and that I tried to do with youth ministry, is it's not, I know it's not built around you. And you've got a team of volunteers, and we'll talk about getting those volunteers in a minute, but you have a team of volunteers who do things so that way, if you're gone, that's one thing I noticed about Ken is like, hey, I've got to be out for youth or for work, or I've got to be out for a family thing. But this person's covering this, and this person's covering this, and this person's covering this. And you can't do that if you're asking them the Saturday night before, unless you have something really, really good. But typically it's hard to do that if you're asking somebody a couple of days before, as opposed to, hey, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be gone. Can you cover this? And it has the ability to do that. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely a positive being organized, because they do know. And now it's like one of my backups will be like, hey, I know you got this going. They're asking me, like, you want me to cover that? Like, they even realize it before I do sometimes, which is great. And it's because you give them information ahead of time. You're absolutely right. And also, again, having those volunteers, you don't have to cancel, because for one, they're trained, they know the kids, they have relationships with the kids, and they're there with you, and they can just jump right in. And it's like, you don't have to cancel. So yeah, every once in a while you do have to, but you're right. I hardly ever cancel anything because of being more organized and having a team around me.
Yeah. And that's something I've noticed that you've talked about with bivocational is this. It seems like you have to be much more intentional because your time that you can dedicate is much smaller. One of the things that everybody struggles with, it was actually what L. Campbell's conversation was on, was volunteers in youth ministry. Something everybody struggles with, but what are some of either the challenges of doing that as bivocational, where you don't have as much time? And then how did you do it? Because you do have a wonderful team. So tell us the tips and tricks so we can all go out and get a wonderful team, and you've solved all of our problems, and it's worth the price of admission right here.
Yeah, there you go. Honestly, I think I am just lucky and blessed right now, honestly, but this is what I try to do, because the team I have is they're parents of kids or students that are in the youth ministry right now. And they want to be there and they want to support it. But here's the trick. You have to be very careful with your volunteers. And I want to give you this advice. We have, what I've created, and it's worked really well, is you don't want, I have like a core team that you can count on, right? It's what we call it, our youth pack. It's a core team of 5, because we are a smaller youth group compared to some of the listeners' churches, I'm sure. We average about 30 students right now. We have this core 5. That's who I meet with. They're the small group leaders. They're the ones that have had the background checks. You trust them with students, and they have dedicated. And then what they do is they'll tell me, yes, I'll take care of this school year. And then we'll talk before the next school year, and we can get more into that in just a second. But what I was getting at is when I first joined Lake Houston, everybody wanted to get involved. It was almost too many. In fact, we had too many adults there. And I hate to say it, but when you're a youth, you're a teenager, you don't want the ratio to be 50-50, as many students, you want your leaders, but you don't want to be full of adults, because what'll happen, Well, what happened is sometimes the adults will be answering all your questions. You're asking the youth the questions and they're answering, or they can cause more harm than good sometimes unintentionally. We'll put it that way. And so what I found out is having your core to do all of your main, your go-to people is important, and then use everyone else for like, hey, this event, we need some extra people. Can you help bring this? Can you help set this up? Can you help set that up? So you're still getting others involved, but you have your core team that you meet with regularly, encourage them. And what I try to do for those 5 is just make it fun for them. Let them try to take a leadership role with different things, like a small group role where they can really get to know the kids personally, on a more intimate level. And just getting them in getting that core involved and let them know they're important and encourage them. And I think that is key. I think that's key. Letting them know that the only reason why the youth ministry is successful is because they are there. And the drawback to the having a full-time job is I feel that I could do more for them if I had more time to dedicate to the volunteer, like send them a random gift or go hang out with just them and have coffee or something. But you do, again, you find balance and you make it work to where you can meet with them sometimes on this, playing golf or inviting them to a Taco Tuesday and just say, man, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And also encourage them to give you ideas. Say, hey, I know I'm not perfect. What are y'all seeing? What are y'all hearing from the students? Mm-hmm. What can y'all suggest? And it's worked out pretty well. And just be careful, because what actually Russell has helped me with is he was saying, hey, man, it's okay to take let your volunteers take summers off, restructure, and then they come back. I never thought of that. I was like, summer's like the busiest time. That's when we need everybody. But I hate to admit it because he's right here. He was right. and all jokes aside, I took that advice because, you've done youth ministry for so long, and I said, let's try that. And it was a great help. Like we scaled down a little bit in the summer where it's more like, you play your games and it's more devotional type lessons, not full blown series. And you don't do small groups. You just kind of keep it as one group. So you don't have to have so many people there at once. And that has helped a lot too. And then you say, hey, next year you don't have to sign up. Just let me know if you are. And you gotta notice, like, okay, well, their kid just graduated. So what you do is you always have a cycle, right? You have your 6th graders coming in. You start talking to those parents, start getting them involved, start seeing who's going to be your next youth pack. So that way, it's like the new, not the new age, the new group comes through, because they're going to either drop out because their kid's not in it, they get burnt out, what have you. So you always have this cycle of, all right, here's the summer, here's my new kids, let me get those parents involved, see who I can count on as a youth pack for the next year. And you just keep that cycle moving. And that has worked, because I do not have the same 5 that I had, 6-7 years ago. It's a different 5, and they're just as good.
And the reality is you have 5, but as you grow, and something Walt Mueller would say from his talking about that I've learned from him and from some of the others about, if you have 5 now and 30 kids, that's about what you're going to have. You're not going to have 35 kids until you have 7. You're not going to have 45 kids until you have 8 or 9 adults. And those are just some set numbers that exist and have always kind of been true. And so if you're wondering why, if you have a group that's not growing, and a lot of times we think pour into the students, but a lot of times that's pour into those adults. And so I'm sure right now you've even kind of maybe looked and seen, hey, who are the 5th graders who are going to be 6th graders? Just to get an idea. Maybe they don't step in yet, but one of the things that we did is we have kind of levels when I was doing youth ministry of involvement. And one was just kind of auxiliary. It was like, I'll drive, I'll provide food, you can use my boat, my house, or on the lake, or what, those type of things. Not committed, one at a time. They could do it once a year. I had one lady who said, I will give you 1 weekend a year for a trip. And I knew that she would give me 1 weekend, and I used it strategically because I knew she wouldn't give me 2. She would give me 1 one time would she go and spend the night and sleep on the floor for a mission trip or whatever like that. And I knew that. And so I could just use her and be like, hey, I need you at this, on this weekend. She's like, all right, here's your one. That's all you get.
Yeah.
But, so you have those, and then you have those who are kind of that inner circle who are, doing the ones who are kind of a different level of ministry. And you're always wanting to look and see who out of these who are doing this auxiliary, who brought food and stayed and hung out with the kids, or who got in and played the games, or who really had a great conversation that you didn't notice, and you're noticing those things. So, but again, that's even more critical with doing bivocational. So what are some of the other struggles that you run into that you think maybe not everybody else does, but at being bivocational, what are some of the things that you would tell someone who's doing this, hey, it's not good, but that's normal. You're not unique in struggling with this or struggling with this.
Yeah. Another thing that, time is going to be my answer for anything, but time comes and there's different aspects of time and how that's a struggle. Let me give you a perfect example. I had 3 weeks vacation. That was it. So we attend 2 summer camps. Each camp is a week long. So what does that do? It leaves you 1 week to spend with your family. So really challenging and maybe you don't even get 3 weeks. You may be in a job where you get 1 week, 2 weeks. And as we all know that summer camps are so important for your students. They look forward to them. They can be life-changing, or maybe you're not even in the summer or winter camp, whatever it is. But you're going to have to take off from your main job to go do that. And that's vacation. That's your vacation days. And that is a sacrifice that you may have to consider, or you set the camps up, but you're not actually attending. So you can have that. Maybe it's a summer intern that can help jump in so you can have more summer activities or winter or whatever. We hadn't got there yet, but we've discussed it. If we grow, that would be a great idea. But the downfall of that is, as their youth director, you want to be in those memories, those moments, those chances of ministry, because you don't get them 24 hours during the week. You get them an hour or two during the week. And those camps is when you really get to have that time to really get to know your kids and really just talk about life. And so it's kind of like almost selfish, like, if they get to go to camp, I don't get to go with them, but I want to be there. So you got to kind of like lay that aside and think of the big picture. Like, how can I make it work to where if we offer 4 camps, that maybe one of the kids that can't go to the 2 that you're going to go to, but they could the other 2, maybe it's by age or just the time in their schedule. You got to figure that out. How are we going to do that? Like you and I, this year, you're going to go to Lakeview. I would love to go to Lakeview, but that's a 3rd week. But I think it's great that actually some of our students are going to be able to attend with you. And I would not want to strip that from them, or that opportunity to get to know you better as well as their pastor. So I'm excited about that this year. And that really opened my eyes of, as we go forward, we're hoping to grow. And if I only get, those 2 weeks, how am I going to accommodate more camps and more kids? And the only way to do that is through volunteers, maybe getting another youth intern, whatever you can do. If you're attending a camp and I'm not, they can do that. So trying to figure that out will be a kind of a challenge.
Yeah. And for me, as doing youth ministry for so long, it is great to be able to go alongside. And I'm doing UM Army with the youth and doing church camp. And so it is nice to be able to have that. But it's also something, I think that would be something else to talk about, is your relationship with your other staff and with your pastor. So can you talk a little bit about that and how, what the critical parts are? And if you want to share the struggles, even though I am your pastor here, you can still share those as well. Like what are some of the things that you struggle with being, because you are distant? I mean, there's several of us, we have a small staff, but there's a few of us who are in the office a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then there are a few who are in just for a little bit of a time, and then Ken's really no office hours at all, but comes in on Wednesdays and here on Sunday. So can you talk a little bit about the struggles and then how we kind of solve some of those issues?
Sure. So that's a huge struggle. I would love to be sitting like right next to your office. Man, we would have a ball, right? We could do some ministry. We could plan some games. We could do some
Then
youth.
probably not get a lot of stuff done on some days. So it would
No.
probably a lot of work done on one day and then not a lot the other day. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it would be, the Nerf wars and the prank. Yeah, that would be great. Um, but being that I'm not there, it kills me, because what I mean is, like, I'm not there to build those stronger relationships between, well, for you and I, for instance, it's hard to get together. And then with the other staff, with the admin, with everyone, it's you feel distant. You do, or you feel like you're kind of left out of what's going on, or you can't be a part of some of the brainstorming, or you feel like, man, if y'all are struggling with this, I wish I would have known. Maybe I could have helped, or man, y'all should have told me I was driving y'all crazy. It just a little bit of a disconnect, and I am guilty of not sharing, because as a church, you have to have a church calendar on when you're going to use facilities, when you're going to do this, when you're going to do that. If you don't have that calendar, which I hate doing, how can you do that? How can you book a room? How can for safety reasons, who's going to be up there that night? And so actually, Russell coming along and making us all sit together and do that has helped a lot with that, I think. But just staying connected is a challenge. And you and I have talked, how can we make this work? Because we are disconnected. Like your previous employment as well. You were somewhere you could talk to your pastor.
Yeah, we were right there.
Yeah, and I've never got to experience that, and I wish I could, but I just can't. And I'm not saying it's impossible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to discourage, but it's challenging. And what Russell and I will do is we'll say, hey, man, can you go play golf? And we'll talk, 1 minute of business, and then we talk mess about golf. But trying to connect is challenging. And I think we've tried to do it once a month, and we've met in your office. You can only do so much in an hour and talk about your personal life, where you are in ministry. It's challenging. And we're actually working on finding ways to communicate with each other better.
So go and tell you, there's one way that we use digital communication.
This is the Slack.
Slack.
Slacker, whatever it's called.
Slack,
Yeah,
Slack. It's called Slack.
Yeah, Slack. There you go.
And we'll put a link in the show notes to Slack. But how has that worked, and what is it? So that way, I'm not the one explaining it, because I know it, but I want to hear it from somebody who's using it. And what is it, and how does it work?
Sure. So Mr. Tech guy over here was like, hey, we're going to use another app. I'm like, oh, great. I am not good with technology. But yeah, it's actually been really helpful in my opinion. So it's basically a organized text messaging is what I would say. You can categorize your messaging by text, like by attendance, prayer, youth group, calendar. And then you go under these groups and you add members to those groups. And you can send a text just to that group, and you can have a discussion under that, whatever that category or topic is. And then there's also like a general where you just want to talk about whatever's going on. And I think the staff use that well. You'll send something on it, and we'll look at it. And I know if it's on that text too, that, hey, this is the church, it's important, and look at this. It's not just a random text and you kind of ignore it or whatever, because we get random text. I think it's helped a lot, and you can do files on there. You can share things, and I think it's a great way for us to communicate. I think it's been working pretty well. Like if you need something or plan something.
And what I like, and I would encourage you to just find some way. So for your group, that may be Group Me, that may be Slack, but it was recommended to me by another pastor who's at a smaller church that has a remote staff, and it's just a way to have kind of an ongoing conversation. The nice thing is you don't have to, I don't expect y'all to respond immediately. And because I may get an idea at 1 a.m, and you can set your notifications so that way it's off until the next day. Yeah. But I think being clear about your expectations of response is good. So that way, hey, if I text you, it's probably more important. If I sit on Slack, I need you to know about it and respond. It's not that big of a deal. Yeah. But so being clear about your expectations of response for those, but having that online digital kind of way that's not email that gets caught up in 1,000 emails, or gets caught up in 1,000 text messages.
Yeah.
And just kind of, hey, we can talk about this, and in between sitting somewhere. The challenge, I would say, is it does add to the 24/7 always on aspect of ministry. And so I would encourage anybody using GroupMe or Slack or text message or anything, set those times where you can be with your family, and you're not always, having a conversation with us, having a conversation while we're supposed to be, watching a movie with our families or paying attention.
So important.
Like
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
It was hard.
And I'd like to mention too, that we've started, we've incorporated some staff meetings where everybody who can attend goes in person, but you guys include me on the Zoom, and you do it where it's on my lunch schedule, and that helps me feel a little, more included. And there's some times where, hey, I have to work through lunch, and I'll let y'all know, and you move on. But those times where I can go out in the parking lot or be at Whataburger and listening to the Zoom makes you feel more connected, and that's a way you can do it as well with people who have to go to work. Try to schedule it when they're having their lunch break, and if they can get away and do a Zoom or whatever you want to use, Teams or whatever, that's a good way to communicate as well.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to do that. Well, we've gone through a lot. I think we've covered a whole lot, and there's probably a whole lot more we could cover. But I also want to be mindful of everybody's time and not be so far, I think I have the longest podcast. I don't want to, extend that and be way the longest podcast. So anything else that you would share, tips or tricks or anything that you have found that you just think would be helpful for someone who is about to enter doing bivocational youth ministry?
I would just want to say this, besides what we've already talked about. If you feel called to do youth ministry and you also need to have a full-time job to support your family, you can do it. You can find ways to do it, and I encourage it. Don't be, nervous or scared about it. Set you up a good team, do your calendar. If you are called to do ministry, do it live. Jump in there and do it. Don't come up with excuses why you can't do it because you have another job, because I am living proof that you can do it and be successful and not get burnt out and love what you're doing. I love it. I love hanging out with the kids. I love doing ministry. And I'm able to do that. And I'm able to support my family, with the corporate job. So it's possible. You can do it. And I encourage you to figure it out and don't be discouraged.
And then you are going on and adding to your stress. So Ken is also going on on the path for ordination currently right now. Any quick tips for those doing seminary and working a full-time job and being a bivocational youth pastor?
Well, let's just say I had a head full of hair and no gray before I started that. You do it. You figure it out. But you need to talk to your family. Make sure you're talking with your spouse. Make sure you have time for them. That's so important to not only follow what God's called you to do, but also make time for your family. And that's a whole nother episode there. But yes, I enjoy it so much. I don't think I will ever be satisfied until I'm doing full-time ministry, and I'm on my path to do that and become ordained so I can do full-time and hopefully become an elder one day. So,
yeah. Well, I think when you mentioned that, I went back, I just pulled up the notes from what we talked about before, like organization, have a team, and ask for help.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing that, one's being organized because you have to turn your papers in, and
yes,
I think that would be a great episode. I may do that episode sometime of seminary and youth ministry, and how do you make that balance? And because you may not be going on to be elder, you may be going on to, in your denomination, whatever that is, whatever that next step, and getting a seminary degree. And lots of times there are some challenges that arise and some priorities you have to make. Even if you're not bivocational, but if you're just doing full-time youth ministry and seminary and family and those type of things. But being organized, having a team, which is your family, and your mom and dad, your grandparents who can watch kids, or spouse who steps in and does whatever, and then asking for help. And so I think those three things, being organized, having a team, and asking for help, would probably cover a whole lot of stress issues within the church.
Yeah, perfect example of this week is we came back from annual conference, youth ministry tonight, podcast tonight. Guess what? Pastor Russell here wants me to do Sunday. He wants me to preach. I did have advance notice, but I did not plan properly. So guess what I'm doing Friday instead of going to see a band at the rodeo? I'm going to be writing a sermon. So there you go. You got to find that balance. And
it's a good Samaritan. It should,
yes.
You have a little bit to work with. So I didn't give you like some obscure passage in Zechariah or something weird like that.
No. And I'm actually happy to do it. Don't get me wrong, but yeah.
So, well, Ken, thank you so much. What are the places that we can catch you if someone is watching this and wants to learn more, wants to talk to you, wants to figure out more? What are some of the places you either hang out online or email, or just how would you want someone to contact you?
Oh man, you can hit me up. What is the best way to? You're my communicator. My you know how to get a hold of me.
I would say so. I mean, what are you on Instagram? Direct message. What's your Instagram? Gav's dad.
That's embarrassing. It is. Hit me up. Send me an email.
Okay, well, let's go with that.
Yeah, there you go. And maybe we can put the contacts somewhere on this. I don't know.
So actually, if you want to email the church, I'll tell them what it is. This will get to you through our email, but just kburns@LakeHoustonUMC.com.
There you go.
We'll get there, or youth@LakeHoustonUMC.com. We'll both get to his email. It's usually the youth director is the technical one, and the senior pastor is the other one.
Your youth ministry, brother.
Yeah, you got that. So, well, Ken, thank you so much, and I hope to have you on again. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and everything with us.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. God bless. And do it live.